Good morning. And here we go already. This day is starting off awesome. So I got this 2014 Ford F-150 here, this gold one. Customer from a previous one with the Subaru that was a totally different diagnostic win, but they gave me another shot here. This vehicle was recently towed into a different shop and then towed here. Diagnostics. I cannot preach diagnostics enough because this one is a prime example. And this is where my schooling that Broadway had sent me to through the GM ASAP. This is where my schooling and my 2-year degree really do pay off. Not that school is everything in this industry. You can learn a lot on the fly and you can learn a lot from an experienced technician and stuff. But this is a prime example of going through your paces, going through the wiring diagrams that we have, checking through everything and making sure before you condemn a module per se like the PCM, because that's what we had. We had no communication with this thing when it got towed in. It was a no start. It's getting messages in the instrument cluster, low oil pressure, other things like that, but that's because the PCM's off the network. The PCM's not communicating, so therefore there's no inputs coming to the PCM. So I had my apprentice yesterday. The first thing that we ended up checking is back here's the PCM, and we pulled off the one connector, which I believe is the one connector that I'm in right now. And there's, I think, 3 power feeds for the PCM relay. We checked out and verified that we had voltage. We load tested the ground circuit. There's 3 grounds coming out of this thing, all going to one single ground. That was all checking out. And then we kind of dropped it for a little bit. And this is where I've learned recently to kind of put things down and come back to them, especially some of these diagnostic ones, because this is where my business has thrived. We're not parts changers here. We don't just throw parts at it. Other shops probably would have seen, oh, the PCM's off the network. We tested powers, we tested grounds. We need to throw a PCM at it. Well, for one, most shops can't program a PCM. Thanks to Snap-on, we now have that capability at Maddie's Auto Repair LLC. But that's not what it needs. I was thinking last night when I was sitting down relaxing, I was thinking back to my schooling, and prime example. So these vehicles in the CAN network, on pins 6 and 14 of the DLC, the high-speed CAN network is what that PCM uses to communicate. And then I went through the diagrams and I see that it goes to the steering wheel control module. And I got to thinking, well, back in school, one of the first things the instructors were teaching us was to go into 6 and 14 on the DLC and check the terminating resistors. There should be 2 of them in the CAN network. And I was reading 120 ohms. They are a 120 ohm resistor. However, this is where the schooling pays off, because when you have 2 terminating resistors wired in parallel, it should read 60 ohms with the vehicle off and no voltage going through the circuit, no messages being sent. And guess what I had? It wasn't 60 ohms. It was 120 ohms. So that was one quick check after we went through and checked the powers and grounds to the PCM. Well, this morning I came out here and I don't know if you can see this, but we went into the DLC, and I'm tagged into 6 and 14 on the DLC, and then we are tagged into the 2 CAN lines of the truck in the PCM, and guess what? It fires right up. And I'm willing to bet if I had the scan tool on this baby right now, I'd be able to communicate with the PCM. So I know where the splice is. The splice on this truck for that CAN network is somewhere on the lower part over by the oil filter from the diagram I'm looking at. So now it's just a question of, do we try and find the chafe wire, or do we go ahead and run an overlay, a proper fix, which is what we would do in the dealer or schooling or wherever. We would overlay the circuit to bypass whatever's chafed, rubbed through, cut, if I can't find anything obvious. And this thing just shut down. There was no damage, no special story or anything going on, but prime example of diagnostics and not being a parts changer. And this is, it's not where I make my money, but this is where the customers come to me time and time and time again, where they've been at other shops, they've been at other places, they've been working on it themselves, and they go by codes, they go by this. But if you pay for diagnostics, I probably got about 2 hours into this truck so far, 2 hours that I would bill, maybe a little more because I'm training the apprentice. But 2 hours is relatively what I would charge him to come down to what I just found out. Now we just have to figure out what the proper repair is. But this guy's going to be happy, and this makes me happy today on Tuesday. It's awesome. And it just goes to show you, if you find the right technician and you find the right shop, people's time and money don't get wasted. You come down to a proper diagnostic, and then everybody's happy. People's money isn't wasted. PCM wasn't thrown at it, and this guy's going to be back on the road probably this week. So make it a great week.